Hey, let's crack on Act 2. Bit to go through. So, character development throughout. This is the act of character development. Realism, we got to see all of a sudden the internal workings of people. And each of the characters, Nora, Christine, Krogstad, Dr. Rank, have some sort of character flaw that we see and then a development through that. So, keeping secrets, true love, plotted for one reason. But as Nora sees this and understands people and events around her better, Torvald remains the same. He's the only character who continues to believe in this charade that's the societal norm, maybe because he's the only character who doesn't keep secrets, who represents that or harbour any hidden complexity. Torvald's opinion of his wife's role in their home is his defining character trait. His unrelenting treatment of Nora as a doll indicates he's unable to develop or grow. Nora uses the pet names that Torvald has as an act of manipulation. So she'll call herself Little Bird, Squirrel, Skylark to feed that image that he has, and thus conforming to his desired standards, he's more willing to help her out. When Nora and Dr. Rank have a chat, we see Nora using that to manipulate him. But when Dr. Rank confesses the true love, Nora shuts that down and refuses because she knows it would be seen as taking advantage, because Nora has this deep sense of moral integrity. Nora explains that Dr. Rank's poor health is due to father's promiscuity, and then we see Nora's torment when she realizes how that is going to impact on her, the fact that she's been deceptive, and her refusal to interact with the children when she feels like a criminal. Also reveals both Torvald and Nora's serious at their belief that the parents can strongly influence their children. So Act 3, a lot in this one. So Act 2, character development. So let's move on to Act 3. So most of the play, this act, we see Torvald delighting Nora's dependence, but Nora does refer to Torvald's restrictions on her actions, the macaroons. But really what we see is Torvald's more of a pushover than a dictator, only a couple of times. He seems to love his wife so much that he'll actually allow her to do anything she pleases, such as giving her more money even though he's told her that she spends it far too much. In the scene following the party, we see Torvald's enjoyment of his control over Nora in a bit of a darker light, with some sexual advances towards Nora that are interrupted. He treats her like a possession, and the language he uses, like the young girl he first acquired a few years ago, contributing to the feeling of control that Torvald's exercising over Nora, is that whole evening was his idea, that she is wearing a costume that he likes, that she is dancing a dance that he has taught her, and that appears desirable. Torvald does not understand Nora's dissent when he attempts to seduce her, and it shows us that he thinks of her more as property, and he doesn't understand when she refuses. He considers her simply as an element of life that he idealizes. When she shows coldness and refuses the sexual advances, he doesn't understand it. He's so long believed this illusion that Nora has created with him that he can't comprehend the reality of the situation, and that Nora's discontent with her life and that she's actually willing to express that. The hollowness of Torvald's promise to save Nora shows how little he actually appreciated her. Nora expects compassion from Torvald after he finds out about the predicament, and after learning of Dr. Rank's immediate death, Torvald confesses he actually fantasizes about risking his life to save Nora. But once given the opportunity, he shows no intention of sacrificing anything, thinks only of himself and appearances. Torvald's selfishness becomes apparent. In the lack of concern he actually cares, it shows about his wife's fate. He panics upon learning the crime, and we see that all he's concerned about is his reputation being damaged. Instead of treating her with understanding, gratitude like a human being, he threatens her, he blames her, and immediately begins to think of ways to cover it up. When he reads Krogstad's letter of retraction, he says, "I'm saved," reflecting just how much of an afterthought Nora is. And she says, "And me?" And he said, oh yeah, of course, you too, naturally. Torvald's selfish reaction to Krogstad's letter actually opens Nora's eyes. She didn't get the miracle that she'd been talking about, and it leads her to rearrange her priorities. Be interesting to know, and maybe this is one of those sliding doors moments you could use for the interpretation. What if Torvald had said, we'll get through this together, dear? Her shift from thinking about suicide at one point and then deciding to walk out, you don't know how much that shows her independence in that time. A way that we can understand that is by looking at a play called Ms. Julie. I want you to look that up, and we'll talk about that next lesson, okay? So look up Ms. Julie by Strindberg, and we'll have a chat about that and what that means. So Torvald's explanation for refusing to take the blame that a man can never sacrifice his integrity shows his gender bias still. Nora's response that hundreds and thousands of women just do that they sacrifice. We see that in Mrs. Lynde and Nora, both who have sacrificed themselves. Nora's childhood innocence and faith in Torvald shatters, so does her whole world. All the illusions she's believed in her life she needs to revisit. She realises her husband does not see her as a person, but rather as a beautiful possession. She voices her disbelief and realises about her father as well, that rather than loving them, they thought it was enjoyable to be in love with her. She realises that the two men cared more about amusing themselves and feeling loved and needed than her as an individual. Nora realises that since she's been treated as a child, she's not ready for children yet, that she's still very childlike and needs to grow before she can have responsibility. Her defiance of Torvald when he forbids her to leave reflects her epiphany that she isn't obligated towards Torvald, and she's not going to let him dictate her actions any further, so she just brushes her hands of him. The height of Nora's awakening comes when she tells Torvald that her duty is to herself. It's just as sacred as her duties as to her husband and children. But now she actually sees herself as a human being, and that she owes it to herself to explore more her own beliefs and ambitions and personality. Now, Mrs. Lynde's manner of fulfilling her personal desires balances Nora. Whereas Nora decides she's totally independent to herself and true to herself, rejecting her family, Mrs. Lynde decides she needs to care for a man that she truly loves to be true to herself. So we see that Ibsen uses Mrs. Lynde as this foil, this character who's really contrasting to Nora, to demonstrate that Nora's actions do not constitute the only solution. Okay, very controversial. You see a way out, this is the way out. But Ibsen's saying, no, let's explore this deeper. Okay? So Mrs. Lynde offers to care for Krogstad and the children, and it's a positive move for both of them. They love each other. Mrs. Lynde sacrificed a lot, and so now she can finally live with her chosen partner. Nora, on the other hand, has sacrificed her own will by allowing her father and Torvald to indulge theirs. So she wants to move on. Ibsen suggests that one must find himself or herself not in an independent life, but rather the independent will. So what's significant about the last line? So a door slams. Have a think about that, and we'll touch base next lesson.